You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارزنيجر
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Super. It's
Yep.
the Super Draft.
It's Super Friday the 13th, the MLS SuperDraft later today.
Yes. For those that don't know, the reason it's called the Super Draft is because back in the 90s, they used to have multiple different ways of drafting players into MLS. They combined them all, and they thought it was funny to call it the Super Draft. You got to think back to the 90s. If you're old enough to remember the late 90s, super and, extreme and those kind of words were pretty, hip. So MLS.
Oh, I remember when everything was extreme. Oh, that was awesome. Awesome was one of those words too.
Yeah,
Could have been the
exactly.
awesome draft. That would have been cool.
The super awesome extreme draft. Exactly.
Extravaganza. Draftapalooza. Could have been Draftapalooza.
I used to go to Lollapalooza every year. Lollapalooza was a lot of fun. I miss Lollapalooza. I know they still have it in Chicago as like a standalone festival, but when it used to tour around, and I saw some pretty good bands. I saw Rage Against the Machine before they were anyone back at Lollapalooza. I think in 95 or something. I don't know. Anyway, now I'm sounding like the old man talking about the glory days. Glory day.
At least you're talking about the 90s, and so we can relate to that all.
There you go.
I was 11, and I was probably listening to, I don't know, a rendition of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles song or something.
There you go. There you go. You can check the bingo card off I sang on the show. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about the Super Draft off the start. I am going to try and put something together tonight when this is all said and done to maybe summarize what happened. There's a lot of conversations out there, and we've had them many times before, but it's worth every year on draft day to sort of explore it. And unfortunately, Canadian Soccer News right now is going through an upgrade so that we can relaunch in a little bit with a greater focus on the Canadian Premier League. There'll still be MLS News on it. But anyway, I can't link my research today because of that. But if you haven't seen my Canadian Soccer News draft analysis over the years, I'll summarize it as thus. Basically, since the start of the homegrown rule, about 75% of players drafted first round of the draft. I haven't tracked beyond the first round. The numbers would get even worse if you kept going lower into the draft, but about 75% of first round picks fail. They never have more than 5 or 6 appearances in Major League Soccer. If that, many of them have 0. You're looking at something like 40% of them would have no appearances at all. So that's what the Super Draft is. There are, of course, Kevin, every given year, there are going to be 4 or 5 good players that are going to be available to the teams that were the worst the season before. There's no doubt that those players can provide use. There's no doubt that there's always a couple players, hidden gems, so to speak. Nick Hagland, I think, from a TFC perspective, who they found a couple years ago, that you can find deeper in the draft. So I'm not suggesting that there's no talent in NCAA. What I am going to suggest, though, is that the draft is past due and it is useless because it does a lot of things, I think, to take the attention away from where it needs to be, which is on the development and the continued pushing of homegrown talent and creating your own stars from your own system. The NCAA allows cheap teams to lean back and rely on the college system, a free system for them to develop their players, Kevin.
Yes, in a way. I do feel, though, that if you go back to Tim Bezbatchenko's words before last year's draft, when he was talking about the USL MLS partnership and with TFC2 and TFC3 now, with the draft in mind, you do have those opportunities for the players to not necessarily just have them in for the MLS roster, but draft them maybe for the USL roster and see if they can rise to the top in your academy from then. That's maybe an approach that some teams will take today when they're on the clock, and that is something different than years prior. Now, with the Montreal Impact not having FC Montreal, does it change the way the Montreal Impact do approach the draft this year? That is one question that I eager to find the answer watching the draft later on.
Yeah, I actually asked Bezpachenko 2 years ago, just prior to the draft, whether having the USL team, that was the year that TFC2 was launching, whether having that team would change how he drafted. And he didn't even pause. He went, absolutely. And he went into his answer, which is very similar to what you just said. What I will say is that we're now 2 years past that, and we're seeing some of those draft picks from 2 years ago got released earlier this year because they didn't pan out. So I do think that, yes, there is the potential there for a longer term look at a lot of these players, and that's good. And I think it's going to benefit keepers, especially because when I did my draft analysis, only one keeper all time that's been drafted in the Super Draft has ever been what I call, an impact player, a star player that's come out of that. That's TFC fans might not want to know about him right now, but that would be Steph Fry. He was the only real impact player that has come out as the keeper position. So having, that ability to have the USL there for that kind of position, those kind of players is probably useful, although in Fry's case, he started right away in Major League Soccer. Look, yes, that said, it's going to be a hype up affair. A lot of people are going to pay attention to this. I'm sure there's going to be podcasts out there today, Kevin, that spend an awful lot of time on how we did a live show 2 years ago. So we're as guilty as anyone in the past. But outside of summarizing it today in some capacity tonight, I put a couple feelers out for interviews. I'll summarize the Canadian picks in some way. We'll get something out on the weekend if you're really interested in that. But until that time, just really quickly, that's how we'll look at the three Canadian teams and see what they might be doing. Kevin, I'll start with TFC. And look, they don't pick the 21st, so there's not much there. And if you look at the history of the draft in the 20s, it's absurdly bad. So don't expect much. There's been a lot of noise here in Toronto about them taking a flyer on something really rough, and I think that's not the worst idea. It wouldn't surprise me if they even took the local kid, Reed, the Canadian general or the GA, if he's still on the board. He actually is impressed in the combine by all accounts. So so that's interesting. But
that's if Montreal doesn't pick him up just before 2 picks before Toronto.
Yeah, because they're, it's a Canadian GA. So to be clear though, as it's been reported, every the GAs are going to be domestics league wide, so it's not going to affect. Although it's still because they're going to be domestics league-wide until they're no longer GAs. And it's not clear to me whether or not once they lose their GA status, whether they'll also lose that domestic waiving status because they weren't, they don't meet the other criteria.
What if they got their green card up until then? So maybe they're fine as well. So there's always that aspect. Yeah. No, but exactly. You mentioned Toronto at 21st, Montreal at 19. And some people are speculating that Montreal wants to maybe get a defender for the future and a defender that you can mold. Maybe Reed is that player available at 19 if he is at spot 19 available. But you might take a chance on a player like this, which has impressed, like you mentioned, in the combine, but has shown there's a bit of deficiencies as well in be able to link up the passing and get involved in a team play. Having the attributes, having the wherewithal is one thing. Be able to having consistency as well is very young player. So maybe that is a reason why he might be still available at 19. Montreal might take a gamble there. A lot of people talk about the defense, but I would get a chance if a midfielder is available. It's a defense heavy draft, especially in the first round, but if a midfielder of high caliber is available, spot 19, I would get it for Montreal Impact. They re-signed Patrice Bernier to all accounts for 1 season. Donadel as is going to be present, Bernardello. But if you're looking at the future, the depth, player you can mold that could be there for 2018, maybe if you have a high caliber defensive midfielder, I would go that route for Montreal.
Yeah, when I did the research, I last updated it last year. I updated every other year. It's a very big undertaking, so I usually wait every other year to do it, and I'll do it again next year. But last year, what I found, I did break it down by positions, Kevin, and I found that actually kind of counterintuitive to what I thought I'd find. Defenders were the least successful position selected. That could be because it's a technical position. I think that there's a lot of smarts involved in a defender, and it's just, I think, easier for MLS teams to to sort of look for veteran presences to bring in there, so they might not get as much playing time for the kids. So that's another other area where the USL might help.
But there's a lot of defenders picked as well in the draft. It's one of the positions that there's a lot of players get more opportunity than in the striker position because of the other aspects of Major League Soccer. So having more defender drafted leads sometimes to not necessarily skewed results, but in a way that there's going to be a little bit more failure because overall there's a bit more players.
Yeah, and you know, to that point, the most successful position, well, the least successful position was actually keeper, as I mentioned earlier. But putting that aside, the most successful position was midfielder, which makes sense because there are more midfielders out there. First off, and you can sort of draft guys at the NCAA level that can be utility players, for lack of a better way to put it. You're always going to need a guy that's versatile, that can kind of plug in. You know, can maybe even play fullback occasionally, can get in, you know, play in the wings, can maybe even do a job in a 6 or an 8 or a 10 maybe. Those are kind of roles that have more value if you have a guy that can just plug in and be a replacement level. So that's kind of what you're looking at. Replacement level is the term I'll use with the super draft, and I think that's how this differs. Outside of maybe 1 or 2 in any given draft, there are, you know, Marisa Dews out there, there are Kyle Laurens out there, but they're very rare. And guys, you're looking for replacement level players for the most part, guys that can just do a role for you and do a role cheaply for you. And that's always the key in MLS. You're just trying to roll it over and keep your roster as cheap as possible so that you can find those impact players through your purchases, through your transfers. And that's the reality there. Really quickly on the Whitecaps before, so go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to say for the Whitecaps, Duane, I have a feeling if he is available, and there's a higher probability that the number 7th, he will be available. A player that's playing maybe not in the backyard, but in a friend's very close backyard. Shamit Shomi of FC Edmonton, eligible for the draft, the first NASL player eligible for the draft. Shamit Shomi maybe trailblazing a new blueprint, a new pathway to the draft. As a young amateur contract with FC Edmonton, he was eligible still for the draft. So Shamit Shomi, Duane, might be available for Vancouver Whitecaps. Maybe the forward is a gamble Vancouver is willing to take, Canadian international, and he can have potential to become the face of the Whitecaps in the future if he pans out to be successful.
Yeah, and I think actually Swami's the most fascinating player in the draft for a lot of people because of his experience in the the NASL. A lot of N's there. It's just a different look to be drafting a guy that's already played in a professional league is something really interesting, and it's got a lot of people thinking, and he's done well at the draft as well. A couple Sigma products in this draft from Canada if you want to take this Canadian as well, so we'll be watching out for that. Whitecaps' final thought on that. I'm going to give credit to Mark Weber for this. He has a good article on the Province if you want to go read it, which talks about really in detail about their drafting philosophy. Our friend Laura Armstrong has a good article in the Star as well if you want to read about TFCs. But in terms of Weber, and I don't know, Kevin, if you want to promote anyone for the impact side of things, but
David Levesque, of course, always a good follow to read on his article on Jean Montréal if you can read French. And in English, you do have the Gazette usually, and Brian Wild, another Joel Altieri at TSN Radio, follow on Twitter.
Anyway, just final thought and quickly, and again, this is Weber's words, not mine, but he suggested that the Whitecaps may look to go with someone who's, this is a hard way to put it, a smart player rather than an athletic player, because they've had success sort of drafting highbrow guys that are educated and they're thinkers and that are people that are sponges that absorb. Because of the nature of the draft, that there are so few great athletic prospects out there that if you're going to draft someone beyond that, that the sort of the priority that the Whitecaps look for is the brain. If they have a smart brain, they figure that they can, you know, obviously if they're playing at a high level, their athleticism's there, but they're kind of prioritizing that sort of intellectual side of things a little bit more maybe than other teams might, with the idea that you can teach those guys a little easier. So that's something to watch for there, Kevin. As I said, we'll have some draft coverage out this weekend in some capacity. I don't know quite what it's going to look like yet. Kevin is busy tonight, but I will put something out, probably 20 minutes or so, that summarizes it. Maybe get an interview from, I'm looking to bring one of the expansion guys in because they're going to be a little bit more excited and they're probably going to get one of those higher end prospects.
Well, highly touted number 1 draft pick, Jeremy Ebobisse, forward for Duke, is who everyone is expecting to be drafted by Minnesota United. So that will be interesting to see who they go for. And sometimes you do see out of nowhere pick, but this one I think is pretty rock solid. Then it goes to Atlanta, Chicago, Dynamo. A lot of interesting philosophies. A lot of defenders are available. So it'll be interesting if you go with a highly touted prospect or if you go with your own guy that you evaluated that you feel is supposed to be number one, but you kept it under wraps and you pull a rabbit out of your hat in the last minute. We have seen it happen many times.
Yeah, and I just got confirmation as we're speaking here. I'll be talking to 55-1 tonight. So you'll get a draft special, guys. You draft heads out there. Although I increasingly don't think there's a lot of them. And when I first started to have these conversations, not to toot my own horn, but when I first started to talk about the draft being overrated, I kind of was on the outside as one of those voices. I wasn't alone, but I was kind of on the outside. Now it's the opposite. I would suggest that most people that pay attention in Major League Soccer think that this draft is getting ridiculous, and they especially think the name is ridiculous. All right, Kevin, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We're going to look a little bit at the African Cup of Nations and some bits and bytes.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
The bits and bytes on Soccer Today. And,
can I come in now?
Yeah, you can come in, Duane. Absolutely. And St. Clair with their new single, Cheating, available everywhere. You can see St. Clair in Ottawa, January 20th. It's coming next week.
That's a little behind the curtain. That bumper throws me every time I start talking, and I realize about 20 seconds in that I'm talking to myself. Only Kevin hears it, though, so there you go.
I don't even hear it. I have what's called the magical mute button right here.
There you go. I'm like, bah, 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 bah. And then all of a sudden, I'm like hearing Kevin's voice again. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's a bumper. All right, moving on. There was a time in my life, Kevin, with the African Cup of Nations that I wanted to strangle it. And that's nothing against the African Cup of Nations, and they deserve their own continental championship. Although, like CONCACAF and the Gold Cup, I think they could do to go every 4 years with it rather than every other. Because they went 3 of 4 years, and then they took last year off. So they've now gone 4 of 6 years they've had this damn tournament, and it throws a wrench into the European teams because they blow all their African players out in the middle of it.
For like a month. It's a good thing that for MLS players, if you take like Oyongo, it's okay that he takes a month off. It's the training camp. He's going to come back. He's going to be well-oiled machine, if you want to put it that way. He's going to be already in the thick of thing, having played meaningful games. But for European team and other leagues across the world where they're playing right now, yeah, it's not the best time.
Yeah, and with City, like, I swear to God, if you look at the 2013 season, that it basically the African Cup of Nations killed their title hopes. If you look back, because Yaya Toure was such a key component to that team, and that's a bit of an excuse. Obviously, teams overcome that. Every team has to deal with it, and I'm being a little bit of a bitter blue when I say that. But nonetheless, every team, every fan base has that kind of story that they'll point to, and that's why it's a bit frustrating that this competition happens so frequently and outside the window. I don't know what the answer is, though, because you obviously can't play the African Cup of Nations in the summer because of the climate there. That would basically be. Yeah, I don't think there's anywhere in Africa you could safely play it in the summer. And so this January is really the only time. As I said, I think the answer is to play it less often. But, who am I to tell African soccer what to do? Let's take a quick look at this particular tournament, though, Kevin.
First of all, it's in Gabon this year. So it's in Gabon. So they are the hosts. So they're position 1 in Group A. When you look at overall, though, if you're looking at myself, because of players that are playing for Montreal Impact, Cameroon is getting a little bit more of a look here in Montreal. But is there a team that gets people's attention in North America that you can think of, Dwayne?
Well, obviously, when you're looking at the Ivory Coast in the past, has had some pretty high-end profile players, but they're moved on, most of their high-end guys. Ghana, the Black Stars, traditionally, especially with their history with the United States, is a team that they're very good as well. That will obviously get some attention. I see Black Stars strips walking around the city of Toronto all the time with people that don't look like they're from Ghana. So they're obviously a team that's a bit, I shouldn't say that like that, but you know what I mean. There's people out there that are kind of just general fans that like Ghana because of the success they've had in the World Cup is what I'm trying to say. The team that's interesting me is Burkina Faso. They almost made the World Cup. Unfortunately, they had some points docked from them, so they didn't quite get there in the World Cup qualifying campaign, but that is a program, a team on the way up. Canada actually played them at a U20 competition a few years ago and beat them when they went really deep. So that was maybe the start of them becoming relevant in that world. Cameroon's an interesting team to me, obviously because of their history, but they're on a downswing right now. They're in pot 3 in this competition in the draw, which meant that their point total in terms of African Cup of Nations success is very low right now. So they are not a seeded team in this. So it's actually Burkina Faso and Gabon is actually the seeded teams in Group A. Cameroon and Guinea-Bissau are not. Egypt is the other team too that I look at. And obviously Bob Bradley's history with that, a team that's had a massive amount of success in this tournament, but has not really done very well lately. Missed the last couple after winning 3 in a row. It'll be interesting to see what they do in this. Anyone else jumping out that you want to brief mention before we go through the groups and then move on to some bits and bits?
In Group B, Algeria is a team that has a lot of players, up-and-coming prospect that you're seeing across European football at the moment as well. So Algeria is a team that has a lot of following, I should say, this side of the border as well. So Algeria in Group B, and if you're wondering, it's 4 groups of 4. Top 2 moves on to the knockout stage.
Yeah, exactly. It's a standard kind of tournament here. It'll wrap up. Actually, wrap up on Super Bowl Sunday is the final at 2:00. So if you're looking to have a doubleheader of football action that day, maybe you can have some fun. Just really quickly,
if you're in San Diego and you're mad at the NFL, you can just watch the Africa Cup of Nations final instead.
Yeah, exactly. Burkina Faso, Gambia, Gabon, Cameroon, Guinea-Bissau. That is the teams in Group A. I think that. Sorry, Kevin.
Oh, nothing.
Okay. In terms of favorites, Burkina Faso I mentioned is likely the favorite there. The seeded team, Gabon, is not likely to be truly a seeded team. Although there is a history in this tournament of the hosts doing quite well. There's some cynical theories on that, but we'll leave that well enough alone. Cameroon looks like probably the second best team in that group, but we'll see how it plays out. As I said, the host factor is something to consider. Group B, just jump in if you have anything to add here, Kevin. Algeria, Tunisia, Senegal, and Zimbabwe. Pretty standard. Yeah, Algeria is pretty heavily the favorite in that group there. In terms of a second, I mean, it's open. I could see any of those 3 teams grabbing it. Right now, the seeded team is Tunisia, so we'll give them the nod. In terms of Group C, you've got the Ivory Coast, the Congo, Morocco, and Togo. Togo, of course, had that horrible incident a few years ago, so they're good to be coming back to this competition. Adebayor is with them, even though he's not with a club team. So, full credit to him. He gets a lot of criticism otherwise, but he's always shown up and was there that tragic day. So there's that. Ivory Coast will be the favorite there. I think Morocco, those Northern African teams tend to step up in these tournaments, so I might give them the nod for third. And the final group is Ghana, Mali, Egypt, and Uganda. As I said, I think Egypt's an interesting team with a lot of success in this tournament. Ghana is perhaps the most consistently good team in Africa. Kevin, any final thoughts? In terms of our coverage, too, we're all going to get some coverage out there. We're looking for someone to help us cover this. So if you know someone or if you are someone that has some broadcast experience, maybe it's a broadcast student, or you're actually covering this tournament and interested, give us a shout. Kevin and I have a lot of things on our plate. So I don't know how much of this I'll be able to truly absorb to give you the quality coverage that I want, but I'm going to endeavor to find someone who can. Kevin, any final thoughts on it?
For just the last group, Ghana, big favorite, like you mentioned, will be interesting to see in a tournament like the Africa Cup Nation, where the favorites not always go all the way. A lot of upsets, especially in the group stage, will be interesting to see in 2017 which Africa powers come out of this group heading into an eventual World Cup with 48 teams in 9 years from now. But before then, two other World Cup. We'll see if there's a African team that can get good results like Algeria did a few years ago.
All right, let's turn to some bits and bytes to end the show. We got to keep it tight today. We had some technical issues off the top, so we apologize for that, but we'll get you a half hour right there. I wanted to talk about I was going to do a larger profile on this, and maybe I will with an LA guest, with a Galaxy guest next week. But of course, if you follow the NFL and go Cowboys, my bandwagon is fully loaded up. But
if you just follow sports, if you just follow sports, you've seen this on the ticker, you've seen it on the sports news. It's big news that happened yesterday.
Yes, exactly. The San Diego Chargers are going to move to Los Angeles and play at the StubHub Center for 2 years while they built the big thing that they're building with people's money. I have obviously, this is a topic that relates a lot to what we've talked about a lot on this show over the past couple of years with the Argos and TFC. As we saw this year in nice climate, there are workarounds on this. My concern from a Galaxy perspective, and as I said, I think I need a Galaxy voice to talk about this at some point, but my concern from a Galaxy perspective will be the scheduling issue. They do claim that the Galaxy will be the first tenant in this, and they will get priority in terms of their scheduling. I have no doubt that will be the case in the regular season. I am concerned about what that will mean for the playoffs because...
Whoa. Are you talking about Chargers in the playoffs? Whoa. Still has to happen first. So
well, I'm talking about the Galaxy playoffs. No, because the NFL playoffs don't start till after the MLS season's over.
Oh, yeah, it's true. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, it's true.
So, yeah, but the Galaxy, look at the MLS Cup. It's it was on, what was it, Saturday night, yes.
Yeah, no, but look at the conference final was the one that was moved because of the Grey Cup. But if you're looking at the difference between at least a CFL and an NFL pitch, at least renovations won't be needed at Carson City for a StubHub Center. You're not going to have to change the stands to accommodate the size of the pitch. It'll be more workaround, and actually might be an interesting setting for American football, the closeness to the pitch and all that you see at StubHub Center in those MLS 2.0/2.5 maybe MLS Stadium. So no, at least I'm interested in a way, but hey, I'm not a Chargers fan. I did kind of like the Superchargers back then, but that's a long time ago. Drew Brees is not a Charger. That's been a while, so there goes my allegiance, and I don't really care about. And I feel like exactly like LA. They don't really care about the Chargers.
Yeah, and look, if we were doing an NFL show, we'd talk a lot more about that. But it seems kind of straight. Well, it's a move. We understand what the move's about. It's about greed. But excuse me, they don't think they're very welcome there. And anyway, we'll move on. Maybe we'll talk to a Galaxy guest about that next week. I did want to mention Gabriel Jesus, the Manchester City, soon to be Manchester City phenom from Brazil, playing the Olympics star in the Brazilian system right now. His transfer is hitting a bit of a snag right now, and it has to do with third-party ownership, which, of course, is banned in England. Palmeiras is trying to trade him. Christ, what kind of podcast am I on here? Trying to transfer him over to City. The agreement's all been in place, but unfortunately, because of the way of that third-party ownership crap that's out there, there's some people that still own parts of him that are sort of resisting this. So the bottom line is that Manchester City is still fighting to get this guy transferred into where he wants to be and where everyone wants to see him. And unfortunately, we won't see him this week, but hopefully that will get worked out in this window. No indication that it won't yet, but certainly it does illustrate how the third-party ownership continues, even though it's banned, continues to be a bit of an issue at times, Kevin.
That's interesting, Duane. I know we talked about it before, but it'll be interesting to do a special show eventually to explain, to give examples of third-party ownership, or what it actually hides, and the dangers of the third-party partnership that happens. And when we say third-party, sometimes there's a lot of third parties. It's not just one included in the same deal. So it'll be interesting to see transfers or the history of big stars down south in developing countries sometimes, a lot of people latch on to get some money. That complicates the thing at a higher level eventually.
Yeah. And look, Jesus, there's a lot of City fans that are holding him up as a savior right now. He's only 19 years old, so I got to be careful about that. But certainly this is the marquee signing of Pep so far. The guy that he's sort of, that a lot of people feel was going to really thrive in a Pep system. This is a player that maybe would have went to a Barcelona in the past, but because Pep is at City, has come to England. So it's an interesting signing that everyone is eager to see what he means to that club. Obviously, as a Manchester City partisan, I'm intrigued by him. I'm having a bit of hesitation in terms of what, if I go on the City boards, I can find pure hyperbole out the gazoo on this guy. But nonetheless, I think it is a very interesting signing. So we are eager to see it happen, but I don't think it's going to make a major dent in any potential title race that City puts in this year. I think, as I said already a couple times, I think City needs to be pretty much perfect the rest of the way to have any chance at a title. So I'm not holding my breath on that. Quickly on a couple things. The MLS schedule came out yesterday. Look, if you want to analyze the schedule, you go right ahead. It's basically the same for everyone eventually. So, just that's kind of my thoughts on it. The one complaint here in Toronto is that there's a lot of Friday home dates. That has to do with TSN trying to make Fridays an MLS night to try and drive that product that way. We talked a lot about that on our TV topics over the past, how it's important to have that consistency of broadcasting. I know it's inconvenience to a lot of the people that show up in the stands. I know I have a friend that's very upset about this because he works mobily a lot in Eastern Ontario, and getting back in for the city on the weekends is hard for him on a Friday. But yeah,
let's put it this way. It's not ideal for the fans outside of the city. It's not ideal for the fans that are driving hours and hours to come see home games. It is ideal for the fans that are downtown and that are working and just have to take the 509 and just get to exhibition and just walk to the stadium. There's different fan base, and Friday night home games, if they're could become a thing, could become something interesting if they're promoted that way. It does inconvenience a portion of the fans, but it does maybe facilitate some portions of other fans.
Yeah. Look, the only thing I'll say, I don't want to be Trump-centric on it too much. It's just the one topic that's coming up right now. It is going to make it complicated on quite a few Friday nights when the Blue Jays are in town. Instead of, just 40,000 people trying to get downtown, you're going to have 65,000 people suddenly trying to get downtown, and that extra 25,000 is going to make it a mess down there. But nonetheless, it is what it is at this point. Unfortunately for me, Atlanta, TFC's not away to Atlanta to the very last game of the season. I really wanted to go in March. Guys, could you not have worked that out for me? Anyway,
nope, apparently
I was looking at tickets. I was looking at the possibility of going to New York City for the Whitecaps CCL game on the 22nd of February, though. It's some pretty cheap options right now, Kevin. Just heads up on that one. Anyway, patreon.com.
Exactly.
MLS decided to take a break for the Gold Cup this year. Hallelujah. I'll just say hallelujah. It's great. They're not going to break for the World Cup qualifying. You can't expect too much from these guys, but at least they're going to break for the Gold Cup. Allow us to pay attention to this. On a scale of 1 to 10, Kevin, how excited are you about this Gold Cup right now?
Right now, like a 3. But it'll ramp up when it gets close to it. It's way too far ahead for me. Like I'm thinking about today and maybe tomorrow. The rest is a little bit too far for now.
Yeah, it's generous. The 3 is generous for my excitement. It's hard. I guess by the time the summer rolls around, we'll have seen the Hex a little bit up here, and we'll be like, oh God, I wish Canada was in it.
The Hex?
At least
what are you talking about? I'm not going to see any Hex. Maybe you will, but
on
Canada
TV.
won't. Oh, okay.
Yes. I won't be watching any Hex in Canada. That is for certain. Only other thing I had in this point is that Brad Guzan looks like he will finish the season over there and will come over here at the end of the season. So probably in June or July. That's not unexpected. Atlanta, hopefully they can figure that out before they get going.
He's going to pull a Tim Howard. Hopefully he doesn't pull a muscle like Tim Howard in the playoff, unfortunately.
Yeah.
ACL,
not a young chicken. We'll see how that works out. Atlanta is going to be fascinating to watch this year, Kevin. All right. As I said, we have to keep it tight today. I got to fly. I will get something out for the draft a little later on today. Don't hold your breath on it happening right away because Kevin's got some stuff going on, so it probably won't get out until
Probably
I don't know,
tomorrow
tomorrow
morning.
morning, let's call it.
Yep. And
Maybe
until next time,
late tonight if you're lucky, but don't hold your breath.
exactly. We'll just follow our social media for the next live show. We'll see each other soon. And until then, have a great draft and have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.